Thank you for coming. What I wanted to do today was break down some common misconceptions people have about hearing loss and hearing aids. People come to me with information and some of it's true, some of it not quite. And my philosophy is, no one ever knows anything about hearing aids until either they experience a hearing loss or maybe their loved one. So good opportunity to see what's truth and what's fiction. So again, a little bit about me. I work at Masonicare Hearing Center located in Wallingford. I've been at Masonicare since 2002, and I have my bachelor and master's degree in audiology from UConn, and I finished my audiology doctorate in 2009 from Salus University in Pennsylvania. It's important to remember that anyone from the community is welcome to come to Masonicare Hearing Center. You don't have to be a Mason. You don't have to be affiliated with Masonicare Continuum. Everybody's welcome, any adult. So let's dive right in. Myth number one, hearing loss only affects older people. The truth is that 38 million Americans have a hearing loss, so regardless of age, which boils down to 1 in 4 households have a family member with a hearing loss. It has been cited as the third most common health-related issue behind heart disease and diabetes. So it's pretty common. And yes, the likelihood of having a hearing loss is greater as we age, but it's important to remember that it's not just an issue for older folks. In fact, studies have shown that 1 in 6 18-year-olds, so college-age freshmen, they have an irreversible noise-induced hearing loss. So pretty scary, pretty understandable, as all of us have earplugs in all the time, earbuds. And if it's being played too loud for too long, that's going to have an immediate effect on our hearing at a younger age. Myth number 2, people with hearing loss, they just need things to be louder. Actually, it's a little different. So on this screen, I put a typical audiogram. So while everyone's hearing is different and unique, this configuration of having thresholds up near here and seeing the slope is very typical of adults. So if we look at the top of the graph right here, this represents frequencies, also known as pitches. 250, 500, really low booming pitches, 4,000, 8,000, really high, sharp, shrill. So just like keys on a piano, goes from low to high. This side of the graph represents volume. 0 to 20 would be extremely soft. 100, 120 would be extremely soft. So we want to find the softest level this person can hear for each one of those pitches. So that's what these red and blue lines represent. Now, if those X's and O's fell up near the top of the graph at 25 decibels or lower, that would be considered normal hearing. If it fell below, it's a degree of hearing loss. So with this individual, their thresholds in the low frequencies are of a mild degree. And then as the pitch increases, that's where we see more of a hearing loss. What that means is the parts of speech that are falling below the line, the person can hear. The parts of speech that are falling above the line are falling outside this person's range. So the parts of speech that the person can hear are vowel sounds, certain consonant sounds, sounds where you use your vocal cords. They have a lot of energy behind them. That gives speech a sense of volume. The ones out here where the person can't hear, F, S, THs, they're soft to begin with. There's not a lot of energy behind them. However, they're crucial for making speech sound clear. So people who have this hearing loss often say, I can hear you, but I don't always understand you. So for most adults, it's not just a question of some volume loss, but the clarity of speech is really the part that's noticeable. With that, one-on-one quiet situations might be a slam dunk. But the minute there's any sort of background noise, distance between you and what you want to hear, or if you're not able to see the person's face, which has become really common now that we often wear masks, when those situations arise, it becomes really much a challenge to understand what's being said. So it's important to remember that hearing loss in adults, usually not just a loss of volume, but more frustratingly, a lack of clarity. Myth number 3, hearing loss really isn't a big deal. I hear that often from people. They say, yeah, I got some hearing loss, no big whoop. But it's important to remember that hearing loss doesn't live in a bubble. It's not considered to be an inconsequential part of aging. Studies have shown that people with hearing loss are at a greater risk for cognitive decline. Now, I always say it's important to realize that if you have a hearing loss, that doesn't automatically mean you will have a decline in cognition. However, hearing loss puts you at a greater risk for it. It's also important to remember that hearing loss puts people at a greater risk for social isolation, which can lead to depression, which can lead to a reduced quality of life. We see that often where people who, because of their hearing, don't feel confident going into social situations. So what do? They refrain from doing the activities they love, which again can make them quite sad and isolated. So important to remember that hearing loss can have an effect on different parts of our life and body. Myth number 4, hearing aids, they just make things louder. They're a basic amplifier. It's important to remember that your hearing loss is as unique as your fingerprint. So thinking back to the audiogram, the graph we just saw, while that might be a typical hearing loss that we see in adults, that doesn't mean everybody's is like that. So with hearing aids, we don't want to just amplify things. We want to focus in on where there's a deficit and give you more access to the sounds that fall in that region and leave the good stuff alone. And we do that both for the right ear and the left ear. So hearing aids are very prescriptive to the person's hearing loss, not just an amplifier that makes things louder. Myth number 5, all hearing aids are the same. Nothing could be further from the truth. So in terms of style, hearing aids can be small, or they can be medium size that are pretty inconspicuous, or for people with more severe to profound hearing losses, they need a larger one that carries more power. So the style is usually dictated by the degree of hearing loss you have. You need a hearing loss that'll provide the amplification and power that you need, but it also has to be something cosmetically appealing. If you don't love the way the hearing aid looks, it's more likely to sit in the drawer. So we want a hearing aid that's appropriate for your loss and in a style that you like. And then within the hearing aid, that computer chip inside can be very different. So this is a particular company I work with routinely, Phonak. And among their hearing aids, they break it down into 4 levels of technology. Now, I don't want to go into all of the features, but in a nutshell, the more advanced the hearing aids are, the more features there are to help a person hear a noise, the clearer speech may sound, and the fine-tuning ability is greater. So depending on the person's lifestyle, their budget, we might recommend one type of hearing aid more than the other. So while hearing aids may look the same, that computer chip inside can vary and give people a different perspective or a different experience hearing. It's important to remember that this is not your grandfather's hearing aid. What was top of the line 5 years ago now is probably obsolete. Just like your cell phone, your laptop, technology is improving rapidly. Hearing aids fall in the same bucket. Levels of technology, different styles. There are features now like Bluetooth connectivity. Hearing aids often now will connect to our devices, whether it be a smartphone or a tablet. That can allow the incoming audio from those devices to stream directly to your hearing aid, whether it be a video clip that you're watching or an incoming phone call, so you can hear in both ears. So with all these variables, it's very important to consult an audiologist, as their expertise can help guide and recommend what's perfect for that person. Myth number 6, direct-to-consumer and over-the-counter devices are just as good as hearing aids from an audiologist. People come to me often saying, oh, I saw something online I can buy directly. or they have a magazine that shows hearing aids that are very inexpensive relatively that will get shipped to them. And I understand why people find that attractive. But it's important to remember that those devices, in comparison to ones that you'd get through an audiologist, are really apples to oranges. They may work for a sliver of the population, but it's important to remember those devices are not prescriptive to an individual's loss. They're not always appropriate for the physical characteristics of a person's ear, which could yield a less than optimal physical fit. And I think most importantly, going directly by ordering may omit some of the crucial components that you would get from going to an audiologist. Our motivation is not to put a hearing aid on someone. Our motivation is to make sure everything's medically sound. We want to rule out whether or not you need any ear, nose, and throat intervention. We want to make sure there's nothing medically or surgically we can do to rectify one's hearing loss. So by skipping that, you could potentially be missing a bigger problem. Again, with an audiologist, or excuse me, by going through a direct-to-consumer, it's not necessarily prescriptive to your unique hearing loss, like we saw on the audiogram. The ability to fine-tune, to adjust the sound and make it subjectively comfortable is usually omitted or limited. As audiologists, we don't want to just rely on someone's being happy with the hearing aid sound. While that's important, we actually perform a verification to show the hearing aid's doing its job, that it's providing the benefit you need. And then a lot of what I do is counseling. Helping people navigate a world with a hearing loss is not something you just know. And it's my job to help you be successful with your instruments. So by going the over-the-counter direct-to-consumer route, you're missing some of those crucial components. Myth number 7, wear your hearing aids only when you think you need them. Now, during the pandemic, that made total sense when we were really isolated, but most successful hearing aid users wear them the majority of their waking hours. Now, you might want to get up and have a cup of coffee or take a shower first, or maybe the last hour of the day you like to take them off and read. You still want to wear them the majority of your day. Make it part of your normal routine. It ensures that you're going to hear to the best of your ability, no matter what happens. So if you have to leave your home abruptly, or if someone stops by unannounced, if you get a phone call, you're already ensuring that you're going to hear. It also stimulates your auditory system. There's a theory that if you don't use it, you lose it. So if we can stimulate and exercise your auditory system, that can be helpful over the long run. And hearing aids, they're not a quick fix. Most hearing losses don't happen overnight. It usually takes a number of years to the point when someone notices a hearing loss to when they actually get their hearing tested. So rather than bombard someone with so much sound initially, we take baby steps. And the more people wear them, the more accustomed they get to the sound quality, and it makes for a much easier transition. So my philosophy, wear the hearing aids the majority of your waking hours. Myth number 8, it's best to get your hearing tested when you notice a shift. The audiology community is really hoping and pushing that people make hearing screenings part of their preventative healthcare battery. So I think about, I get my vision tested once a year. I can't order new contacts until I get my vision tested yearly. I get my teeth cleaned twice a year. So before I even leave the office, they set me up for my next one 6 months down the pike. I get a physical once a year. I get a mammogram annually. People over 50 get colonoscopies. We get blood work to check our cholesterol. The point is to address these issues sooner than later. So going back to the beginning, we know hearing loss is not an inconsequential part of aging. It's not something that only affects a certain age demographic. So we encourage people, get your hearing screened on a regular basis, preferably yearly. We can monitor changes, compare it to your baseline. And if you have changes, we can prevent treatment options earlier than later. The average length of time when someone first notices a hearing loss to when they actually get their hearing tested is 7 years. So that's a long time to be deprived of auditory information, a long time to potentially go without medical treatment. So we always are trying to reduce that time period. Myth number 9, hearing aids and cochlear implants will restore your hearing back to normal. Unfortunately, they don't restore our hearing back to normal. We're working with a damaged auditory system. There's nerve damage, and we can't bring that back. However, 90 to 95% of people can benefit from hearing aids. So if people said to me, you know, I tried hearing aids, they didn't really work, always begs more questions, because usually there's a solution out there. And it's important to remember that if you're in a place that's less than ideal, meaning there's background noise, distance, or lack of visual cues, you can't face the speaker, you're still going to struggle, as anyone would. If I go into a noisy restaurant or a wedding reception or a cocktail party, even as someone with normal hearing, it's going to be a challenge. Imagine what that's like for someone with even a slight to mild hearing loss. So, myth number 10, only the person with the hearing loss is responsible for successful communication. It's important to remember that communication is a two-way street. Not all of the onus falls on the listener. The speaker has to set it up for success. So I always like to end with these 5 points. This is something people can do immediately, both as the speaker and the listener, by letting the speaker know what we can do to make communication easier. Get your attention first. If my father is reading the newspaper or doing the crossword puzzle in the newspaper, the world could be ending and he's not going to stop and look up from that paper. So I know to say, hey, Dad, by doing that, he's able to stop and shift his focus and he's ready to listen. If I don't do that, inevitably, he's going to ask for repetition. Limit background noise. If you're at home and the commercial comes on and you want to have a conversation, mute the TV. If you have music on in the background, maybe turn that down a little so it doesn't interfere with your ability to understand. I know when we go out to dinner as a family, we request a table that is not quite near the kitchen or the entryway, somewhere that's quieter in part of the restaurant. Now, if there's only one table available and that's the one we have to take, that's our reality. But anything we can do to at least try to minimize the background noise, it's going to be easier. Face each other. I know when I go to the grocery store, I have a mask on. The cashier has a mask on. Not being able to see the person's face has become really challenging, again, as a person with normal hearing. So people with hearing loss are really struggling. So if you are in a situation like at home with your loved ones, face each other, because it's only going to make it easier. If you can do that, do it. We get a ton of information from visual cues that help us supplement what we might not be hearing. So facing each other is great. Limit the distance between you and what you want to hear. If someone's down the hall and they just start talking, inevitably you'll ask for repetition because that distance makes the sound quieter by the time it gets to your ear. So closer is better. And then speak at a natural pace. Hearing loss in adults is more of a clarity issue. Again, not so much a volume. So not speaking too quickly can be really helpful. It allows a person to process that speech sound so that they can understand it more easily. And even people who should know better, like me, to slow down, we don't always do it. So don't be afraid to let the person know what they need to do to make it easier. So I'm always appreciative if someone says, Hillary, can you slow down a bit? I'm like, yep, whatever I need to do. Or, hey, I heard the beginning of that, but not all of it. Could you repeat that second part a little more slowly and can you face me? Giving people a directive tends to be really beneficial. So again, not all the responsibility falls on the listener. Us as speakers, whoever we're speaking to, have to be mindful to make it easier for both of us. So that for me is a really good takeaway going into the remaining holiday season. whether it be a big get together or even a small get together, something to be mindful of to make it more enjoyable. So yeah, so thank you for listening. I hope I was able to tackle some of those misconceptions, dispel some of the incorrect information. This is my contact information. Again, I'm at Masonicare. My email address is there. There's our number, and we welcome any questions or appointments. Come on in.